We're now ready to define the basic trigonometric functions sine, cosine, and tangent for acute angles. So that means for angles that are less than 90 degrees but positive. So between 0 and 90 but not including 90. Okay, so how do you find them? So if you have an angle that is between 0 and 90, then you can just draw it. Okay, so let's say my angle is theta, this one. You can just draw it. And then after you draw it, you can draw the perpendicular and then complete this triangle. So you can complete a right triangle this way. So you draw the angle and then you draw the perpendicular, you get a right triangle. With that right triangle, that's how you can define the sine, the cosine, and the tangent. And here are the definitions. The sine of the angle, written sin angle, whose angle is theta, is going to be, by definition, the opposite, so whatever the length of this is, divided by the length of the hypotenuse. So opposite divided by hypotenuse. The cosine is going to be, so the cosine of the angle is going to be the adjacent divided by the hypotenuse, and the tangent is going to be the opposite divided by the adjacent. All right, so sine is opposite divided by hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent divided by hypotenuse, and then tangent is opposite divided by adjacent. And there's a very nice mnemonic for remembering this because this is something you have to memorize. It is the so-called word, with these words, SOHCAHTOA. SOHCAHTOA, right? SOHCAHTOA, SOHCAHTOA. So remember that word, made-up word or acronym, SOHCAHTOA. That means sine equals opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. Okay, SOHCAHTOA, SOHCAHTOA. All right, with that, let's do the first example. Given the triangle shown below, find the values of sine of t, cosine of t, and tangent of t. So here's the angle t, and that's our triangle. All right, so in order to do this, because that's a right triangle, it's just a matter of remembering SOHCAHTOA, that's all. So, for example, sine of t in this triangle, well, that is so, right, according to SOHCAHTOA, opposite divided by hypotenuse. The opposite side, the side that is opposite the angle is 7. So the opposite is 7 divided by the hypotenuse, which is 25. So opposite over hypotenuse. And that's it. That is what sine of that angle is. Whatever the angle is. I don't know what the angle is. We're going to learn how to figure that out later. But whatever that angle t is, the sine of that angle is 7 over 25. Now, what is the cosine? The cosine of the angle, using SOHCAHTOA, SOHCAHTOA, that means cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay. The side that is adjacent to the angle is 24. So that would be 24 over hypotenuse over 25. So the cosine of the angle is 24 over 25. Okay, and lastly, the tangent, SOHCAHTOA, the tangent is opposite over adjacent. So the tangent of the angle t is SOHCAHTOA opposite, which is 7, over adjacent, which is 24. So the tangent of t equals 7 over 24. And that's it. Memorize the acronym SOHCAHTOA, and you'll have this. You'll be able to do this really easily. Okay, so these are the first three basic trigonometric functions. There are 6 basic trigonometric functions total. Now let's talk about the next 3. The next 3 are the so-called reciprocal trigonometric functions, and that's because they are just the reciprocal of the first 3. So taking the inverse, the reciprocal of each of the 3 functions that we just described, you're going to get 3 more, and these are the 3 new functions that we're going to talk about. So the secant is the reciprocal of the cosine. The cosecant is, by definition, the reciprocal of the sine. So cosecant of theta is 1 over sine of theta. And the cotangent is the reciprocal of the tangent. Okay, and you have to memorize this. There's no way around that. I'm not giving you these formulas. Okay, you have to memorize that the secant is the reciprocal of the cosine, that the cosecant is the reciprocal of the sine, and the cotangent is the reciprocal of the tangent. So that the cotangent is the reciprocal of the tangent, that is really easy to remember. What is sometimes a little bit harder is these two, and that's because people can mix them up really easily. So I'm going to tell you the way I remember it. The way I remember it is that you see the C and the S always go together. So then that's the first letter of the function. So the first letter of secant is S, and the first letter of cosine is C. So the S and the C, you see. So the reciprocal of secant is cosine. Now for the cosecant, that starts with C, and that is the reciprocal of the sine. So you see that C and the S go together once more. The C and the S go together. So you cannot have that the secant is the reciprocal of the sine. That would be 2 S's. That's wrong. Or you cannot have that the cosecant is the reciprocal of the cosine. No, that's wrong. That's a mismatch. So the cosecant goes with the sine, the secant goes with the cosine. And that's how I remember that. Okay, so again, this is just really easy because it's just once you find sine, cosine, and tangent, all you have to do is find their reciprocals. That's it. So let's look at this example. Given the triangle shown below, find the values of sine of alpha, cosine of alpha, tangent of alpha, secant of alpha, cosecant of alpha, and cotangent of alpha. Basically, find the values of all 6 basic trigonometric functions. All right, so let's start with the first 3, the basic 3. Sine of alpha, cosine of alpha, and tangent of alpha. Sine of alpha, according to the acronym, SOHCAHTOA, that's the definition. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. The opposite is 4, that's the side that is opposite of the angle. So opposite divided by the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is the biggest one. So that would be 5. So the sine of alpha equals 4 over 5. Now let's find the cosine of alpha. Cosine of alpha is SOHCA, that means adjacent over hypotenuse. Adjacent, the angle, the side adjacent to alpha is 3, and the hypotenuse is 5. Okay? And lastly, for the first 3, the tangent of alpha. What is that? SOHCAHTOA, opposite. Opposite is 4. Adjacent is 3. Remember, the hypotenuse is 5. So SOHCAHTOA, opposite divided by adjacent. And that's it. So we found the basic 3. Now, from these 3, we're going to find the next 3. But that's the easiest part because those are just the reciprocals. So the reciprocal of sine remember the sign goes with a cosecant. So cosecant would be the reciprocal of sine, so all you have to do is find the reciprocal of that. So flip it, that would be 5 over 4. Secant, that is the reciprocal of cosine. Secant and the cosine go together. So this one is 5 over 3. And lastly, the cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent. So this one is 3 over 4. And that's that. That's all. Okay. Now, so if you have a right triangle in front of you, you are able to find the sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, and cotangent from the picture. You should also know how to do it in the calculator. So in this next example, supposing that you know the angle, you should be able to find the corresponding trigonometric value using the calculator. So you see, you should the thing is that some angles are given in terms of degrees, some angles are given in terms of radians, and you need to get comfortable with finding trigonometric values of both with your calculator. So in this cheap calculator that I have, you see that this word right here that says deg, that means that my calculator, if I enter an angle, is gonna interpret it as being in degrees. So because the first example is in terms of degrees, that means my calculator is good to go. All right, so let's do cosine of 45 of 40.5. So that's gonna be cosine of 40.5. And again, because it says deg here, my calculator understands that that angle that I just entered is degrees. So we get that the answer for this, the value of that is 0.76. And it says round to 4 decimal places. So this is going to be 0, 4. Okay? So that's my cosine button. You have to find your cosine button in your calculator. All right. The next one says sine of pi over 8. Okay. I cannot just enter that because my calculator is in terms of degrees, and I need to change that. In this calculator, to change between degrees and radians, I think it is this button. And you see, I press that and I get that. And that allows me to change between radians and degrees. So I'm gonna hit that, and now it says radian. So now, when I enter the angle in my calculator, pi over 8, my calculator understands that pi over 8 is not degrees, it is radians. And it's gonna calculate the sine correctly. So the sine is of pi over 8 is 0.3827, rounding to 4 decimal places. Okay, next one. Next one says cotangent. Okay, if you look at your calculator, mine, there's no button for cotangent anywhere in this calculator. And that's because we don't really need it if we know what cotangent is. Cotangent is just 1 over tangent. So if I can find the tangent, it's just going to be 1 over tangent of 36 in this case. Now, this problem is again in terms of degrees, so we have to change it back to degrees. So change it back. Now it says degrees, so now we're good to go. So this one says 1 divided by tangent of 36, and this is 1.3764. Okay, so that's the answer for that. The next one says secant of pi over 16. That's again radians. So we need to change it back. And I did this on purpose because you have to really get used to changing back and forth, because usually in the homework or on the test, some problems are in degrees, some problems are in radians, and you need to just keep changing back and forth and not forget, because otherwise you get it wrong. So secant, again, there's no button for secant, but we know that secant is 1 over cosine pi over 6. All right, so we're going to put 1 divided by cosine pi divided by 6. And that is 1.1547. Okay, last two. You should take a moment and try to do the last two. Okay, make sure you find all your pi buttons, your tangent buttons, and know how to switch back and forth between the two. And give these two a shot. All right, let's do them now. I'm already in radians, so I'm good to go. There's no cosecant button, but I have to remember that cosecant is 1 over sine. Okay, sine. All right, good. So now this is going to be 1 divided by sine, 2 times pi divided by 3. And this is 1 point. There's something. How is it possible I got the same answer? Let me see. Let me double check that. 1 divided by cosine, pi divided by 6. Interesting, we got the same thing. And now let's do this one more time. Sine divided by 2 times pi divided by 3. Okay, the first few numbers are the same. Okay. And then the very last one is tangent of 10. So now you see 10 degrees. That's radians. If I do it now, it's going to get it wrong. It's going to give me the wrong answer. So back, change back. Now it's in degrees. And then tangent of 10 is 0.1763. Okay,